Money don't have no feelings, people do. This conversation comes down to, do you really want to stop it? Do you really want to make change? That is the million dollar question. Any other walk of life outside of football, if somebody racially abuses somebody, you get the sack. Why is football so different?
It's been exactly 1 year since the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis, Minnesota by the police officer Derek Chauvin. It was a brutal video that many around the world watched as a knee was pressed against his neck for a full 9 minutes and 29 seconds. But the impact and reach of that video led to huge moments across the world, mass demonstrations and protests, not just in the United States, of course, everywhere, including here in the United Kingdom. Last year, we hosted Time for Change. We discussed racism and inequality across the United Kingdom in all walks of society. And we're going to continue that conversation today with a closer emphasis on football. I'm delighted to say we are joined by the former West Ham, Queen's Park Rangers and Sunderland defender, Anton Ferdinand. Anton, how are you?
I'm good, thank you, and thank you for having me.
Anton, thank you so much, firstly, for joining me to continue the conversation, which for many black people, of course, is a difficult one. Looking at the video of George Floyd's death, I know it was a moment of trauma for many black people, but for many people in the black community, it wasn't the first time they'd seen images, material like this. We talk a year on from the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd. A lot has moved on in terms of society, major organisations and individuals learning about social injustice and racism as a whole. But we're going to focus in on football as well, in particular, you know, an area of expertise for you, of course, during your time in the Premier League. But I did want to start by asking you about what we now know was a very traumatic time for you in your career. In 2012, you went through a very public court case. You suffered racial abuse on the pitch, which the former England captain John Terry denies. You know, I have to say that, of course, but it was a very public case. There were strong reactions from people across the United Kingdom. You've discussed it in your BAFTA award-nominated documentary, Anton Ferdinand, Football, Racism and Me. But I wanted to ask, really, from 2012 until now, how do you think society in the UK has changed in terms of its reaction to your case? Would it be different now?
I think it would be different now because I think I would have spoken a lot earlier. I would have spoken at the time of it happening. I think some of the reasons why I never spoke at the time was I wasn't in control of what was going out. I wasn't in control of the whirlwind that was happening around me, so to speak. Whereas now, and Twitter was only really just starting around that time. Whereas now, as professionals, you have your own platform, whether that be Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. So whatever you type comes from your fingertips. It ain't verbally said to someone and then they interpret it for you. You know, so I think I would have been able to speak with a clearer head at the time. I would have been able to speak with a clearer head right now. And that's the way society is as well. Society is at a place where people do speak out and speak up using their own platform. So I think it definitely would have been a different reaction. Still would have got a lot of the abuse that I did get, as we still see people today getting the abuse. So I don't think the abuse would have changed. It probably would have heightened, so to speak. But in terms of me personally, I think I would have spoken out more than I did at the time.
But you had the chance this year, an important year, of course, given everything we've spoken about. You had the chance to publicly have your say in many ways. People got to see the real Anton Ferdinand and they got to find out what that experience was like for you. What has the reaction been to you being able to tell your story?
As I'm aware, a good one. But it's hard to gauge because we've been in lockdown, don't interact with people, so I don't fully understand or can't really gauge what type of impact that the documentary has had. I've been nominated for a BAFTA and I've won other awards for it. But in terms of that feeling when you connect and interact with people, I don't fully understand it right now because I've not been able to do that and everything's been over Zoom.
Did you relive it in any way? Were people sending you messages this year like they were back in 2012?
On the press run to it coming out, yeah, it was quite public. I got racially abused on the way to it being aired. So yeah, it wasn't as frequent, of course. But yeah, I still got some type of racial abuse sent my way. But if I'm honest, it was expected, which is the sad thing about it.
Why is that?
For me to expect, it was
why was it so expected?
Because of you see what happens today with football. You know, the minute someone of ethnic minority makes a mistake on the pitch, it's almost like they know, oh, I'm going to get abused. You know, and when you're talking about this topic, the way that I was expressing about this topic and about my incident, and the person in question, I always knew there was going to be some type of backlash because of the person in question. And so he's a national hero. You know, was an England captain, was Chelsea captain, he's a national hero. And for a few years was probably the face of English football. So it was inevitable that I was going to get some type of backlash and some type of abuse.
Let's talk about George Floyd's death and the BLM protests that have happened since, you know, mass demonstrations all over the world, I mentioned. In football, do you think George Floyd's death has been used as a positive or a negative?
I'd like to say a positive. I know some people don't like the fact that we take a knee, or the players take a knee and coaching staff take a knee before games, but for me that's a positive because it keeps the conversation going. You know, a conversation that's uncomfortable, how do you make it a comfortable conversation? You've got to keep having it. And I think not just that, it sparks the conversations too, because a young boy or girl might be watching football with their parents, and that might be the first time that they see players that they adore and look up to taking a knee. And the question is, why are they doing that? Mum, why are they doing that, Dad? That sparks a conversation. And that's why I think it's powerful. Yes, everyone has their own feelings on it and they have their own choice whether they want to do it or not. But I think not just looking at that as an image as being powerful, especially for our community, but for the conversation that needs to continue happening.
What do you make of fans who are now coming back into ground, booing players when they take a knee just before the game kicks off?
I think it's ignorance. And this is my one grievance with Black Lives Matter in terms of football and to do with football. There needs to be one voice, I think this is my personal opinion, there needs to be one voice who controls the narrative of Black Lives Matter. You know, me and you know that what it means. It's not saying only our lives matter, we're just saying our lives matter as much as everybody else's. But because that narrative wasn't pushed in the right way, because there's so many different people pushing it, it becomes cloudy. It becomes a grey area rather than it being black or white. And I think that's where we're seeing like the likes of Millwall fans booing when they went back into the stadiums a few months ago, and nothing being able to be done about it because, okay, well, who are we following? Who are we listening to? What message are we listening to? Are we listening to the Premier League? Are we listening to the EFL? Are we listening to Kick It Out? Are we listening to the PFA? Are we listening to the FA? What one are we doing? There needs to be one voice when it comes to this topic. And who that voice is, I don't know. But it will definitely take away the grey areas that are there at the moment.
Why do you think there is a disconnect between the different organisations and how anti-racism and the anti-racism message is administered in football? Because we saw Black Lives Matter on the shirts for a period of time. It then became the Premier League's No Room for Racism campaign. Some players still took a knee, others have spoken about how they don't want to. Some clubs now saying their teams aren't going to do that anymore, that they can spend their energies, anti-racism work elsewhere, and their time is better spent doing other things. Is it beginning to break apart a little bit, that message?
I think so. I think one thing with this, and it goes back to society, unity conquers everything. You know, we see the power in numbers, strength in numbers. When you're united, there's strength. We've seen it with the Super League that was about to break and about to happen. Unity stopped that. Unity within football stopped that. And my question is always, why is there unity when it comes to a pound note or somebody who's going to lose money or is going to affect someone's pocket, to somebody's skin colour? You know, when it's somebody's skin colour or their background or their ethnic origin or their religion, the energy ain't the same, and I don't quite understand that. Money don't have no feelings, people do. You'd rather look after someone's feelings than a pound note, surely. You know, and I just think the more that we show disconnect, the easier it will be for people organisations like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and so on, to be able to pick us apart. I've been fortunate enough to be in meetings with social media companies, and that's one thing that I've seen. They don't want to see unity because they know how powerful unity is.
I was going to ask you if there is still a racism issue in football, but there is, you know, football is such a wide industry now. We can ask about the fans, we can ask about players in the changing room, we can talk about institutional racism or organisational racism, systemic racism in the FA, for example, if we wanted to go down that route. It's vast. But while we're specifically on the point of social media and the conversations that you've had, is there going to be a way of stopping racist abuse online anytime soon?
There is a way of stopping it, it's just whether they're willing to do it. That's what it comes down to. This conversation comes down to, do you really want to stop it? Do you really want to make change? That is the $1 million question. And at the moment, the social media companies don't want to do it. And the only thing that I can see the reasons why is because it's a monetary issue. You know, if a tweet of discrimination pops up on someone's timeline or someone's feed, that sparks conversation, that sparks interaction, which then for the social media companies, it's monetary. So do they really want discrimination off their platforms? From where I'm sitting and from where other footballers are sitting, and ex-professionals and people in the public eye, and not even just people in the public eye, because it's not just about us. It's about the wider society. They matter too, you know? It needs to be safeguarded. It needs to be a safe haven for everyone to go on. But is a safe haven and something that don't spark massive conversation, is that viable for the social media companies? No, it isn't, because then that stops money coming in, you know, and this is what it comes down to. Do they really want to get rid of it or not?
Do you think, speaking about that theme of unity again, that one day, like we had that short social media blackout from certain clubs, sports media organisations, players coming offline as well, do you think there would ever be a day that football turns its back on social media?
If things don't start to change, I think it will do. I'd be fully involved in that, if I'm honest, and that's from because of my own experiences of the abuse that I suffered on social media and their unwillingness to deal with issues, and not just that, taking responsibility, holding themselves accountable for what they're not doing, you know, and I would be fully involved in that. But for us to do that, it's not just everyone says, oh, the footballers need to come off of social media. Everybody does, you know, the sponsors, and that's why when we done this 3-day boycott, I was quite vocal on it on Sky Sports and other things that I've done, that I want to see the likes of Adidas, Nike, you know, and other sponsors like that come away from social media too, because again, they're paying money for slots on their social media platforms. take away the money, do the social media platforms start to listen?
There's a good chance they will. Listen, what we've had to listen to in terms of football stadiums is some booing around taking the knee. I know I mentioned a little bit earlier on, but I did want to ask you how long you think taking the knee should continue before football matches. And whenever it does stop, what can football do to build on it?
I'm not sure how long I think taking a knee should take place. But there needs to be something to continue this conversation. What that is, I don't know. And how football uses football as a tool to continue the conversation, I don't know. But the conversation needs to stay alive.
Booing taking the knee, does that portray football negatively?
Yes, it does. It does. It shows ignorance. And I understand there's a tribal element to football in terms of the fans and stuff. I understand it because I lived it in terms of playing as a professional and sitting in the stand watching teams. But we're in a different time now. Society's different now to what it used to be. And what I mean by that is you've only just got to look at the marches that have happened across the world, by the way. Years ago, when there was marches and demonstrations, it was only ethnic minorities on them marches. Now, these marches and these demonstrations, they're multicultural. Everyone's talking about racism the way that we would speak about it. They don't necessarily feel what we feel, but what they're doing is they're trying to understand it, and that for me is probably bigger than anything, and that's why, me personally, we are far from where we want to be, 100% as a people. We're so far from where we want to be in terms of equal rights. Of course we are. But we're not going to do this. We're not going to be able to conquer this alone. We need people who look like the oppressors to speak the way that we speak, for maybe the oppressors to understand what it is that they shouldn't be doing. And I think in terms of seeing the demonstrations and the marches and them being diverse and multicultural, all of a sudden that might spark someone, especially in business, who's at the top of the tree, to go, well, someone looks like me's talking like that, I might have to listen, I might have to start listening, otherwise I could have a problem. Because essentially it comes back down to the pocket, comes back down to money. If I don't have my own people on side, what am I going to do? And I think that's why what we're seeing in society is a fantastic thing.
On football and the organisations that run the game, how do you think they're dealing with incidents of racism in 2021? We saw a high-profile case this season. Rangers player Glenn Kamara racially abused during a Europa League match. His opponent was given a 10-match ban. I know you've spoken to him, or at least you offered to give him some advice and some help during that period of time. I don't know, did he get the help that he needed, and is football doing the right thing by players who are racially abused?
I think, as you said, as you alluded to, I've reached out to him and said if he ever needs any help or needs any support, I'm here to help. But I think I have to mention Steven Gerrard, who's the Rangers manager. The support, the verbal support that he gave him alongside the physical support was the best I've seen from a manager. And just got to listen to the words he was saying. He's my player. I trust him with everything. I trust him so much.
With his life, I think.
I trust him, that's exactly, I trust him with my life. And I think when you're listening to that and you've got somebody supporting you out in the public eye in that way, sometimes that's enough. And I think in terms of football dealing with these issues, they're so far behind, it's ridiculous. What the What the fines and what the bans should be, I don't know. But it's clear that they're not enough. And I always go back to it. You look at UEFA, the way that they dealt with that compared to the way they dealt with the Super League being announced. It's chalk and cheese, there's no comparison. The only difference was, with the Super League, their pockets were going to get hurt. With Glenn Kamara being racially abused, their pockets weren't getting hurt. So it's like, and I said it before, I've said it on your show, Hugh. Forget the incident. The next day, their fan base posted a picture on Instagram, Kamara is just an N-word, with a banner saying that. Happily posted it. Forget the case and everyone's saying wait for the case to finish so you can make up your mind and see what UEFA do. Just for that alone, they should have been kicked out of the competition. Why should they be in the competition still when their fans are doing that? Because as we've seen, if that club would have done something where all the clubs would have moved away from UEFA or from UEFA, they would have acted quickly and they would have acted assertively. How can all of a sudden FIFA, UEFA be saying to players, if you play in that league, you'll never play in the World Cup. You won't be able to play for your country. You won't be able to play in our competitions. You won't be able to play in this and that, which is the pinnacle of players' careers. But when somebody gets racially abused, they're not sure what to do.
Or it's a 10-match ban.
Or it's a 10-match ban.
As opposed to what would be a whole career outside of the World Cup or the
Exactly.
Euros.
And let's have it right, in any other walk of life outside of football, if somebody racially abuses somebody, you get the sack. Why is football so different?
Why do you think it is?
I don't know. But what football can be is the catalyst for change. And I'm not just talking about that. It can be the catalyst for change when we talk about the boards of these organisations, the senior management positions. And I use the FA as a perfect example. Greg Clark would still be in a job if he had the right representation of ethnic minority working with him. Because there's not a chance he would be on TV calling black players coloured if he was around the right ethnic minorities. Because no matter who the person is, no matter if it's your boss or not, if you're the right person, in the right way, you're going to pull him up. I wouldn't sit here and let someone call me coloured, even if it was the prince or the king or the queen or whatever. I wouldn't allow that. But it's the way you do it. You educate them. You know you can't say that. Don't call me that again. You can't say that. You might be able to say that in your day and age, but today you can't say that. We're ethnic minorities. Do you know what I mean? And I think football can be the catalyst for change in that. The FA have got no one of ethnic minority on their board. But if you look at their teams from under 15s to the senior team, there's more ethnic minorities than white players.
A lot is said about that transition from on the field of play to coaching, boardroom roles in football, executives, even broadcasting. I know, of course, you've done work in the media alongside me. So why do you think that is hard? Lots of people say players don't see an avenue in coaching. Black players don't go down that route into media, or they don't want to be on boards of clubs because they're not seeing faces like them in the roles already, so they choose to leave football and do something different. Do you think it's that reason, or do you think it's something else?
I think that can play a part, and I always say to people, continue to educate yourself. I always say it to people, like, I can only do what I'm doing, and I've just passed an effective board members course, which allows me to now sit on any board, because I understand all roles and responsibilities of a board member, whether it be non-executive, a CEO, a chair, or an executive board member. I've done that now. So now, if I'm going for a board position, I've eradicated, which is probably the biggest excuse: you're not qualified enough. You're not qualified enough. Because I don't want to say, oh, your skin colour's wrong. It's you're not qualified enough, or you ain't got enough experience.
Well, that's the same excuse we hear in coaching in football.
Of course.
You know, you've got to do the work, you've got to start down the bottom, you've got to do your hours to be able to get an opportunity to coach a decent club. And you and I both know that isn't the same experience for white coaches. So why do you think that is?
I think maybe it's because, maybe in terms, especially you look at clubs and the owners of clubs, maybe they don't see, because they don't see success with an ethnic minority, because there hasn't really been a successful black manager. But they see success everywhere else. Maybe that might play a part, but again, we need to be given the opportunity to be successful. It's getting that opportunity, which is very few and far between. You've only just got to look at Steven Gerrard, Frank Lampard, and these guys that are getting jobs. Wayne Rooney getting a job, but then Sol Campbell's got to start at the bottom. Paul Ince had to start at the bottom. You know, and it's like, it is that question, that is a massive question. Why are we not getting the same opportunity as others? And sadly, I don't know the answer to that.
Is there a remedy to it, in that there are, including your brother, lots of people putting forth plans for an independent regulator of football in England? You know, does that need to be a key part of it, that there would be something maybe like the Rooney Rule, you know, interviews for black coaches, you know, when every role comes available? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an ambassador for a thing called the Race Code, which is part of governance, you know, and when you look at governance, and I think it's Principle J, it talks about the NOMS committee, where their role is to look at diversity. So it's in there in the governance, but is it being transpired? Are you seeing that in a working environment? No, you're not. So now I'm an ambassador for the Race Code, which prepares and puts in place a framework for ethnic minorities to be in a better position to get senior management roles, whether it be on the board, whether it be a senior role within the day-to-day running of a company. You know, maybe that's something that football needs to look at too.
Do you believe that there would be an improvement in the number of black coaches in the football leagues, black managers in the football leagues, if we did have something like the Rooney Rule and everyone was given an opportunity to at least interview for a position? What we see a lot in football, as we know, is, you know, an ownership group fires their manager with a plan already in place to replace them with another manager. You know, maybe it's a manager that they know well, they've had a recommendation from, who's done other things at other clubs. We've also seen as well first-time managers being given jobs. Maybe that's on the recommendation of other coaches in the game, other people in the game. Maybe that's just on their name as well, because some of them are, you know, as you say, national heroes, you know, people that have played 100 games for England as well. Would it help improve the game in England and those opportunities for black managers if they were guaranteed that interview?
See, I see the Rooney Rule as a type of box-ticking exercise. All you've got to do is, and part of the Rooney Rule is I'm aware of is you have to interview a certain amount of ethnic minorities.
Yeah, at least one.
Yeah. For
a head coach position.
That's okay. I've done that. I was never going to hire him or her, but I've done it. I've ticked that box. There's got to be some type of accountability. How that is put in place, I don't know. But like I said, in terms of the corporate world, the Race Code does that. there's accountable. It makes an organisation accountable for hiring ethnic minorities at a senior management level. And I think how you incorporate that in football and other sports, I don't know.
You would encourage football clubs in England to sign up to something like the race code?
100%. Of course I would. Because it will give people that look like me a better opportunity, a better chance of fulfilling their dreams.
I know you speak to a lot of organisations and boards at the moment about how they can improve diversity. There are some small companies out there, maybe people watching this, who don't know that it could improve their business, maybe don't think that it would improve their business, maybe think it would be a negative for their business. Do you have any words for them?
My words to them will be, grow up would be a word. You need to grow up and try and see sense of what's going on in society. You know, we're starting to see unity in society. It's time to stop not giving people jobs because of the colour of their skin, but start to give people opportunities. Allow people to fail rather than thinking that they're going to fail before they've gone in because of their colour of skin. And I'll give you an example. I know people that I grew up with in Peckham, they go to a job interview, they don't want to put their name because they think the minute they put down their name, the job's gone. Never, that their application is getting put over there just because of their name or just because of where they're from. Some people wouldn't even put Peckham, SE15, because of where they've grown up, where they're from. Got to start looking past that.
We're 1 year on from the death of George Floyd. There's been, as I say, protests across the world, organisations wanting change, individuals learning about societal inequality, anti-black racism. My final question really is where you think racial equality in the United Kingdom will be 10 years on from the murder of George Floyd. Where do you think we'll be?
I'd like to think that in 10 years' time we would have, I don't think we eradicate racism, not a chance in our lifetime, I don't think. But I think when you look at it now, and as I say, we're nowhere near where we want to be, but there's less racism on the streets than what there used to be. What I'd like to do in my time is get to a place where racial slurs are said at home, watching the TV, no longer on the phone, on social media, no longer in the stands at a football game, because people don't feel comfortable to do it there because people that look like them are going, what are you talking like that for? But if that's what they want to do and that's how they live their life and that's what they think, keep it at home.
Do you not think that's a negative though? Do you not want those people to think differently?
Of course, but we're never going to change everybody. There's a lot of people that are set in their ways. A lot of people that come through their generations that are just set in there. They've watched their dad do it. They've watched their granddad do it. So they think if they don't do it, they're not like them. They failed them. You know, you've got to remember, especially in football, that's a massive, massive thing. That's what parents need to understand and grandparents need to understand. When they're taking their child or their grandchild to a game, that young person's watching them. So if their granddad and their dad are shouting racism, of course they're going to be thinking, I've got to be like that. To be like them, I've got to be like that. And it's going to be hard to change them children. I think the only way that we change them is education. You know, and when you look at the curriculum at school, why is there only 1 month of the year about Black history?
As we look ahead to the Euros, you know, there is a very diverse England squad going with Gareth Southgate. just finally, if there was a moment like Glenn Kamara suffered, if one of the players in the England squad were to suffer racist abuse on the pitch, we've seen plenty of other players do it in Europe this year, how big a moment would it be for England's players to walk off the pitch like they almost did in Bulgaria?
I think it would be massive. Be massive if they walked off the pitch. But why is the onus on them to walk off the pitch? Why ain't the chairman of the FA coming downstairs and the FA taking them off the pitch? Why should it be Gareth's and the players? Why should it be on their shoulders? Because as I've said to you before, players will get abused for doing it. The manager will get abused for doing it. And they're individuals who have feelings. If the organisation do it, sure they can get abused, but is that gonna affect someone's feelings? No, it isn't. Why don't FA man up and take control of the situation and go, you know what, Gareth and the boys, you ain't going back out there and we'll take this one. To me, that's powerful.
Anton, thank you for sharing your views with us. Very interesting and enlightening. I just wanted to say thank you for joining us on Time for Change. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.